Renewal.
Okay, cool. Right, if you can't hear me, just tell me to shut up. I've been informed that I speak very, very quietly, apparently. Right, thank you everybody for coming to join us on this Fantasy and Horror on Screen panel. We'll get to the introductions in a minute here. Basically, just to kind of lay down the land on this thing, from about 76, VHS has altered the way that we consume media. So us weirdos and perverts could get our hands on almost anything we could imagine, provided, of course, we knew a guy who knew a guy. When DVD came along, it was a whole other situation. There was better distribution, but still the problem was the media itself. You can watch anything as long as you can afford to pay the import fees on that copy of Sleepaway Camp, which I'm still trying to see legally, by the way. Like, I VPN that shit, it's hard to find. And then streaming came in, and that's changed all that. But with that, if you can dream it, you can find it, but it's come with its own set of problems. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. First, we're going to put in a little bit of a drinking game for funsies. If you are that way inclined. Anytime anybody insults a remake, take a sip. Anytime somebody says cathartic, probably me. Art film, also. Insults the Lighthouse, Kelly. The book is better. Yes, sir. There you go. Drink Jim.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, I told you.
When you say insult the lighthouse, do you mean the film or
Yes,
the
sir.
buildings?
We can do both. That'll double our chances of actually being insulting to the lighthouse. I mean, let's be honest, it could have been a still of a lighthouse and it would have been a better film.
Now you get a drink.
I got my hands full. I'm going to double drink in a moment. Right, next up. Thank you, Tim. Oh. Need more elbow there, sir. The book is better. Anybody says indie film, and this is from Adam here, you can't create the big screen experience. You can't recreate the big screen experience. Right, so we're just going to go around the table here. We're going to start with Adam Simcox. Give us a little self-introduction of yourself, your drink of choice, so people can find you at the bar afterwards, of course. Your streaming service of choice, and the worst film you have ever seen. We're going to polarize you guys so you hate us from the get-go.
Good questions right from the off. I'm also an author. My debut novel, I'm sorry, I'm going to give it a quick plug. My favourite was on my worst film. I'd say like the first Suicide Squad. I'm really obsessed with how bad it is. I've watched it so many times. I genuinely think it's the worst big budget film I've ever seen, but it's like hypnotically bad. It's almost so bad it's good. It is flat out shit, but there's a beauty to it. Anytime you've got Cara Delevingne waving her arms like a tree, and that is the big bad, something's gone wrong. Favourite streamer? Ooh.
That's streaming service.
Favourite streaming service?
What's your default go-to?
I'd probably Now TV at the moment. That's probably what I watch most of.
Okay.
Yeah.
High class gentleman.
Wow. I wouldn't say that. Which brings me on to drink. I'm a cheap drunk. I guess any pretentious craft beer. I'm yours.
You're not a cheap drunk in this hotel.
To be honest, I don't think this out of me.
You'll be glad to know
they don't.
I'll be calling instead.
Yeah.
Is that it?
That is it, sir. Thank you very, very much. Guy?
Hello everybody, my name is Gavin Smith. I am a novelist. I also teach script writing and I have written scripts. I currently have an adaptation of a Sir Arthur Conan Doyle novel doing the rounds at the moment. There was a whole host of other questions which I've now forgotten. Was it
Worst film?
Worst film.
Worst film.
So, I mean, I'm going to make a lot of friends here if I say Star Wars New Hope, haven't I? If I point out that Suicide Squad was a wonderful, wonderful film in comparison, I am in no way going to become the villain of this panel now.
Which episode?
Sorry?
Which episode?
New Hope.
Star Wars.
Or Star Wars as we called it in the 70s, but...
Yeah,
so,
the original.
Yeah. So, I'd add that to the whole trilogy. The idea that the other Star Wars films are any worse is just objectively ridiculous. So now that I've made friends with absolutely everybody in the room, favourite streamer?
Streaming service.
A favourite streaming service is actually deeply shameful, because I think the things I watch the most often is Amazon, and I am ashamed of that. I fundamentally don't want to give Jeff Bezos any more money, but I really like Bosch, so I'm not sure. It's a moral conundrum. It's not a moral conundrum, and you shouldn't watch it, but I don't know how
Convenience.
his penis ships or whatever it is. Anyway, I feel that I should stop talking and possibly should have a couple of minutes ago.
We're going to dig into that Star Wars thing a little later. I'm not a Star Wars nut by any description. I'm a dickhead mostly. But speaking of dickheads, the wonderful
my name's Tim
Levin.
Hi guys, my name's... Is this working? Yeah, it is. My name's Tim Levin. I'm a novelist primarily. I've written quite a few novels. Some people would say far too many. I've written quite a few tie-in novels as well in the Star Wars universe. And Alien and Predator and Hellboy, and I've done some movie novelizations as well. I've done 2 Hellboy novels. Yeah.
Really?
I have.
We're going to talk about that later.
We will, yeah. I've also been lucky enough to have a couple of movies made based on my books. 2 very diverse experiences, which I'm sure we'll get into later. One was called Pay the Ghost with Nicolas Cage, and the other one was The Silence with the amazing Stanley Tucci, who thought I was his double on set when he saw me. He thought I was his stand-in for the day. I said, no mate, I wrote the book. He said, I haven't read it. And I'm getting more into screenwriting now. I've not had anything made, but I've got stuff sort of tentatively in development for TV and movies. I thought I was going to be controversial, but Gavin's beaten me to it. So I do like Star Wars, but the Princess Bride leaves me cold. I'm sorry. Yes! Yeah!
Here we go.
I'm going to get burned in effigy, but we're going to have fun doing it, Tim.
That's the line. I'm turning this off now.
But Gavin didn't get ooh when he mentioned Star Wars, so I think...
Join us in the parking lot for a Wicker Man.
But it's also funny how films can rehabilitate themselves. I remember walking out of the cinema after seeing Starship Troopers and saying to my wife, that's the worst fucking film I've ever seen.
Oh, God.
But I really like it now. I think I totally missed the whole... How can you miss the whole parody, right-wing parody thing of it? But I sort of missed it. I thought that's a really shit action film, but it's actually a really good film. Haven't seen Suicide Squad. I've seen the new one, which is
the new one's good.
All right, yeah, it's good fun. It's good fun. Was that it? Oh, streaming service. I'd probably go with Gavin on this. I think Amazon, but our household is immersed in all of them. To be honest, we've got them all. We don't need them all. Apple's really come onto the scene and doing some really interesting stuff. I think. I like C. Anyone seen C?
C.
It's really good with Jason Momoa.
SEA.
SEE.
Really?
It's based in a world where nobody can see. It's really good.
I thought it was just him with his shirt off for like.
Well, it is largely,
episodes.
yeah.
Everybody just looks at
Yeah.
him.
Well, so do I. Right, I'll shut up now. Is that? Yeah,
That
that was
is
it. Yeah.
perfectly sufficient.
Perfect.
Thank you, Tom. No pressure, Tom.
My name's Kelly White. I'm a horror writer, primarily short stories, but I'm working on my first novel, which is heavily influenced by found footage horror.
Perfectly acceptable. Terrible films, come on.
Worst film. Honestly, the worst film I've ever seen is The Room. That is an hour and a half of my life I will never get back. And I've seen some pretty terrible horror movies in my time. Yeah. Favourite streaming service?
Yes, please.
At the moment it's probably Netflix, but I have no real loyalty. I just cycle through whatever's good. I try and have like 2 to 3 a month, and then I cancel depending on what they've got on at any one time.
Most of the time we'll recommend stuff to Kelly and she'll say, well, I gotta wait 2 months on that because I've got this subscription to Amazon this month and fuck Netflix. They're not on the calendar until next time around. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll get a little less kind of formal with this crap, but just to give you guys the heads up, you're going to make a recommendation at the end of this panel to our audience of kind of something that has affected you, a film, a TV show, something that's kind of exemplifies the good stuff that we've got out of this streaming culture that we have, and the availability of film and how easy it is to make movies. So we can redeem ourselves, everybody except Gavin.
I'm intrigued you think I'm here for redemption.
I know.
This isn't a redemption story.
Right, open table question. How has this availability changed your tastes? Are you more inclined to kind of go down the rabbit hole and find stuff you otherwise wouldn't watch? Do you jump into kind of foreign films?
Ooh. I mean, the problem and the benefit of streaming services is they kind of push you towards things. So if there's a couple of things that you want to watch and you know and you like, then, and particularly Netflix is bad for this, they'll keep recommending that sort of thing afterwards. And it's, you know, it can be a blessing and a curse. I think one of my problems with streaming, just to get to the problem with it, and it's also a good thing, is there's just so much stuff, and a lot of it is fine. You know, it's all well made, it's all well budgeted and financed, it's usually got 1 star, you watch it, it's perfectly good, and you'll never watch it again.
Yeah.
So a lot of the, I'm loath to say specialness, but a lot of the specialness, I think, has gone from films particularly. Because before, to get a film into a cinema, I'm not saying it had to be good, but I think it had to go through a slightly more rigorous process than it does now. Like Netflix will not think anything of spending 50 to 60 million and just seeing if it works. And in a way that's brilliant, but in another way I do think a little bit of the quality control and specialness has faded a bit.
Do you think that's to do with there's so much of it now? There's the old quote, 90% of everything is shit. There's so much more stuff now on streaming platforms because, to use a word I hate, they want content. I really hate that word, but it's what they need to fill their slots. Netflix is spending $1 billion this year on content, and that's a staggering amount. So there's more bad stuff out there, but there's also a hell of a lot more good stuff, I think. Certainly TV-wise, you know, series-wise. You'll surf Netflix and see a series you've never heard of, and then start watching it. It's incredible. But I think it also makes it a bit more disposable. It's a bit more. You're more likely to watch 2 or 3 episodes of a series and think, oh fuck that, I don't like that, and dump it for something else. Whereas some of us on this panel remember when there were only 3 TV stations or 4 TV channels, and you persist because you sort of felt invested.
It was a habit-forming thing across the board. So basically, they'd bring you back week after week. You'd go to the water cooler. You'd have a conversation at work. You'd speculate, and now it's instantaneous gratification. So we've got this lower threshold for what we'll put up with and what we'll wait for.
Sorry,
I was just going to say the problem I have with streaming services is that the algorithms narrow your view of what's available. And so, I mean, I try and watch as widely as possible, and finding different things once it's picked up that I enjoy, horror or sci-fi. Finding something a bit different becomes a lot harder because you have to dig more. And I think that's one of the things that it's obviously, it's very good marketing because they're picking up on what you like, but it's stopping you from seeing potentially brilliant content that you would enjoy because you've got eclectic taste and you wouldn't pick up on otherwise.
Yeah, to quickly jump in, like one example I always give is the show called The Alienist. And not many people have seen that show. And in any other era of history, I mean, this would be an enormous deal that just wouldn't get made. I mean, it's set in the 20s in America, so it's a period drama, the sets are enormous, the costumes cost a fortune, there's loads of CGI. I think it costs something like $5 million an episode. And just no one's seen it. I mean, so few people have seen it. They don't advertise it that much, and it's still got a second series. On one hand, that's brilliant, because I think it's a good show, and it's also a sign they'll take a risk. My worry is it isn't sustainable. There's only so many $60, $70 million shows that you can make that no one essentially watches before it all goes tits up, for want of a better expression, because Netflix run at a loss every year, right? And there's only so many people that can sign up to them. I mean, who is allowed to sign up to Netflix?
Yeah.
I was just, I don't terribly disagree with anything. Is Golden Age of TV on the drinking game?
Let's do it. It is now.
Okay, well, I won't say that then. But,
Content is, though.
I think we seem to be in a situation where we're down by getting exactly what we want, because there is no doubt in my mind that the television that we are seeing now is, if not much more better, much more betterer than...
You're a writer, aren't you?
What was I talking about? Much more betterer than what we had when I was a kid. But I mean, I have become much more lazy because I can get what I want so quickly, as opposed to when I lived in a town which had an art cinema, which is more. That was art.
Same difference.
You can't just drink when you want. You know that, right?
But you can't do it with an audience.
Yeah, but I mean, we're sort of getting what we want. We're getting so much of what we want. We're tired of what we want, and I recognise that there is a problem with algorithms. But I mean, it's also, it's a mirror darkly, isn't it, that we're looking into? So
Very, very much.
So somehow we need to find a way to enjoy the standard, because the standard of writing is amazing, and the standard of writing is amazing in TV because it's now writers who are showrunners rather than producers. It was always producers beforehand. So the people that understand how stories work are actually getting a chance to tell stories. That and the ability to do long-form storytelling in TV shows rather than the more serialised things. Anyway.
I believe that the first kind of 5-season arc ever created for TV was Babylon 5. And there's a whole story about how JMS got it made, but that has now become the standard format. Previously, because you couldn't guarantee that people could find the episodes, you had to go to bargain bins. You had to make it more accessible for people when they turned on the TV and they could just watch an episode. It begins. An episode happens, you get a meat and potatoes, a monster of the week or whatever else it is, and then it returns to the status quo, so anybody could tap in and out at any episode. But now, because you can find stuff and you can track things down, it changes the entire game of storytelling, and you can tell these winding, deeper tales.
It become more novelistic, really.
Exactly.
I think movies, features, generally are short stories or novella length ideas, whereas TV series now, long-form storytelling over multiple seasons is like reading a fucking fantastic novel that, and I think we are being spoiled by so much good stuff. I think, again, referencing my age, I remember when I used to have to wait for an album to come out and I'd go to the record shop every week. Peace of Mind, Iron Maiden, God, I was looking forward to that album. And I'd go down every week and then I got it and it was out, yay. But now everything's literally at the end of your finger, everything you want to see or hear or read or watch. And I'm not sure that's a good thing. And I remember when, it was only like a year or two ago, the streamers started dropping whole series in one go, didn't they? As opposed to episode a week. I sort of missed the episode a week thing. Some still do it. Like C, this thing I mentioned, that's one per week.
Amazon normally drops one per week. I believe Shudder has been experimenting with the format with stuff like Creepshow. But generally things like Lower Decks and those things, Amazon's whole structure is about getting you to watch more. Interestingly, of all of the streaming services we're talking about, I think Amazon is the only one in Bezos that advertises the streaming service to you while you're watching the streaming service, and they've got your money already. They've got you by the balls, and they want to reach over the head with it too.
There's the reason you can afford spaceships.
God damn.
The algorithm thing's really interesting as well. We were chatting about this at breakfast, the fact that when I had the silence on Netflix, Netflix made a call to me to tell me about how they promote. And it's they not only track what you watch and advertise films to you that they think are similar, or TV series similar to what you enjoy. They change the title card depending on the type of stuff you like watching. So each movie on Netflix might have 5 or 6 title cards. If your history shows more action, you'll get an action scene from that film as the title card to try and lure you in even more. So it's a real science they've got, which does, like Kelly said, present to you just similar stuff to what you watch as opposed to diverse stuff, more, different stuff. So I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, really. It's just the way it is.
I want to ask a question about that, because this just might be the fact that I'm a Luddite, but does anybody else, when you open up Netflix or Amazon or what have you, and you've got the list of all the things that you want, now obviously those are algorithmically programmed to appeal to you.
Yeah.
But if you fancy something different, does anybody ever feel that they're trapped and they can't get out of that front screen no matter how hard?
It's difficult finding something different.
The algorithm is forcing you back time and time and time again as Jeff Bezos stands over your shoulder, laughing maniacally.
Just an interesting show of hands. Sorry, Gavin.
No, sir.
Who actually has their own Netflix account and who borrows somebody else's, like?
We've got our own.
We're not Nogs.
No, it's just an interesting kind of cultural question. So we got 1, 2, 3.
We've got our
And for
own.
which you give us what for?
Do you have? Do you have your own? Do you borrow?
Borrow.
My own.
Borrow.
Yeah, and that's really the whole culture of the streaming thing, and they're trying to lock down on that to basically prevent us spreading this stuff out. And I completely get it. Legitimately. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say one of the more positive things about streaming services is they allow you to see content that you wouldn't normally see. For example, foreign language horror. I've noticed that it's especially Japanese horror. There are a lot of the J horror films that are just not available in this country on any platform. You can't get them on physical media for love nor money. But Shudder have recently bought Noroi the Curse, which is a Japanese found footage horror film, which is absolutely fantastic, that wasn't available in this country until they bought the rights to it to stream on Shudder. So that's a really positive side of it, and I think more of that would be good. If
Becoming a widespread thing. I mean, Shudder is doing a really, really good job, I think, across the board. The international licensing is a whole other discussion, which I'm sure has been a pain in your butt, Tim.
I don't get involved in that on the movies.
Not at all.
Don't, to be honest. No, I mean, it's nothing to do with me.
No, I mean just in terms of kind of like because you'd imagine that as this medium evolves, you'd have an international licensing agreement for across the planet. So what ends up happening is, if you happen to subscribe to 5 or 6 services, you can actually watch a movie jump from one to the next, from month to month.
Yeah.
So you'll have one movie that'll be on Shudder for a couple of weeks, then you turn on to look it up, and then you go, well, damn it, and now it's on Now TV. Mm-hmm. And you can actually see them migrate between the services.
I think that's because services let movies go after a while, and then somebody else buys them up.
Oh, absolutely. No.
It happens with, it happened with Friends, which didn't Netflix buy Friends for like $1 billion or something ridiculous?
Yeah, I believe so. It went off and then came back on, and everyone was pretty excited.
It was their most successful thing, though, right? I think in terms of views.
I think it probably was. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
What, dragging people to the service?
Yeah, it was money well spent. I mean,
Yeah.
they never get that money back, but yeah, who knows? God bless Friends. Which I really know.
Gavin, I believe I was creeping on you on Facebook.
Okay.
I've got to research this stuff somehow, so we got to go somewhere. You said a while ago, I believe, that you managed to kind of make some money on a script for the first time after kind of studying.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that?
Well, so 25 years after I left my film course, I managed to make some money on a script. Thank you for bringing that up, because it doesn't really feel like a traumatic, something that I've achieved. And notice I said I made some money on a script, not that I sold the script.
That is, it does not matter one way or the other. It's basically moving in a process.
Yeah, I got what was called a nugatory fee from a producer I was working with, which in a rights agreement so that he could effectively take the script to, he could show the script to a production company who were refusing to look at it unless it was submitted by a producer. So, I mean, that was a long and short bit. I mean, I'm afraid that's not a really interesting answer.
So he optioned the script basically, did he, for a while, or a shopping agreement type thing?
Yeah, effectively. But it wasn't even that, to be honest, because the production company still wanted the right to option it. Option it themselves. Basically, it turned it into a joint agreement between me and him to go over, and it was basically a bit of bureaucratic nonsense. But because of how it worked, he had to pay me for it. So yeah.
You're on the left.
Sorry, can I just jump in? So, just jumping on the back of something that Gavin said earlier about how the quality of writing has improved with streaming services. Do you think, and to Tim as well, do you think that streaming services have given writers more opportunity to get their work out there? And how do you think it's given us more avenues to explore, or is it still?
There's definitely more avenues.
Yeah. Without
a doubt. I mean, I'm just flirting around the edges of screenwriting and TV and films, and not really, I've got a great manager in LA who is priceless, actually, having a good manager. But I mean, you just have to look at all the stuff being made that we've talked about. People have to write all of that. And so without a doubt, there's more avenues. It's just finding your way along them, And I don't think it's a case anymore that they just go to the same people all the time. Like, there's always writers in Hollywood that are always going to be busy and always making $1 million a year, whatever. But there's also lots of people like, us on the panel who have a great idea for a series. And if you can get it to the right people, you've got a chance of getting into some sort of development. There's no guarantee it's going to be made. Probably still 98% stuff written is read by 6 people and put on a shelf, but, which is soul destroying. But that 2% chance is worth taking a stab at,
It is a numbers game.
Yeah, when you get excited when a script consultant picks up your script and does a report on it. I broadly speaking, I agree with Tim. I just want to qualify. I mean, there are more writers working now in producing film and television than there has been before. At the same time, certain markets have effectively closed down. The spec feature script is no longer a thing. Like all industries in media, large companies have become very risk averse. So they want content. They want content that has an already previously built-in audience. So you're never going to get a multi-million blockbuster unless it's part of an existing franchise for the most part, or you've got some serious people behind it. That said, I mean, what I find I'm enjoying a great deal at the moment is, and I think Netflix does this very well, or rather Netflix suits my taste more often than not, is the mid-range feature film has moved to the streamers and out of the cinema, and I'm quite enjoying that. But I mean, I think indie film is becoming very, very difficult to finance an indie film at the moment.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And also, I think one good thing is in terms of novelists, there is a hunger for content for a production company. There is. So like you've got a much better chance now, I think, of getting something optioned, even if it doesn't get made as a novelist, than say 15 years ago. You've got a fighting chance. It's almost to the point, oh God, well, I like to know what option my book, sort of thing, which is absurd. But like before, 15 years ago, that would be an amazing thing if it did. Now, if you know a few authors, then probably one of them's had their work optioned, which I think is a relatively new thing.
It's always the arsehole as well. It's always the one wanting to get
Oh, thanks.
Let's be honest.
Well, I'm just going to call it like it is.
Princess Bride is shite.
It's a 1 in 5 chance, basically, is what we're looking at. Yeah.
I was going to say something, but I've forgotten.
Yeah, no, me too. I started
Yeah,
speaking, and
okay.
I figured that sentence was not
Oh,
coming.
yeah. You both talked about the fact that novelists, prose writers are more likely to get stuff optioned nowadays. And it's because the risk-averse thing, they just want IP. They don't want to take a chance on a spec script. Even if the IP is a novel that, like mine, don't sell massive numbers in the slightest. But if you can put a novel in front of a producer, or even better, a graphic novel, so they know what it looks like. Oh, it looks like that, pretty shiny. Then you much better chance of getting something at least off the ground and into some sort of development. And every development process is, I find, is completely different. There's no roadmap. You always go left and right. I've got a good friend who's looks like he might be having a film made of a script he wrote 30 years ago. So also, never give up.
Yeah, that's great. I'm to understand the natural evolution of kind of climbing the ladder to the point of showrunner is you've got to kind of come in as a story writer, then a script editor, a story editor, and then you basically prove your worth through the industry until you get to the top where they'll actually hand you a project and say, okay, you can helm this thing.
I'm not sure how that works. I think that's probably a different route for everyone as well.
I mean specifically more like long-form TV.
Yeah, it could be that you've written a few scripts and got them made, and then suddenly you've got an original idea that's good for TV, and they may give you a shot at being showrunner. That's the dream scenario. But
apparently you just don't sleep ever again.
Yeah.
As long as you live, you just die on your desk.
Yeah, being a showrunner sounds horrible to me. I got into writing because I could sit in a room on my own and listen to music I like.
I listen to a podcast called Script Notes. And Craig Mason is like the co-host, and he talks a lot about being a showrunner he's the showrunner for The Last of Us, which is still in development. But it's very interesting about how he and John August have kind of like worked their way up through the industry, writing spec scripts and then working their way up to showrunner.
I believe there's a thing with IP, is that so a lot of kind of bigger writers and bigger creators won't even look at their own kind of message boards and fan forums, so they've got kind of deniability as kind of a rule. So kind of they will present fan fiction to you, and then you'll kind of have a look at it and realize, oh god, this is too close to something I've already written. We've got on the filming schedule, it's in the can, and now we've got to scrap this episode in fear of litigation. It's pretty intense stuff. Adam, can you tell us about your sale to Netflix in 2008? It wasn't it?
Sure. Yeah. It sounds way more impressive than it actually is.
That's what I was working on.
Yeah. So my first film, my debut film, was made for like 20p. It's very low budget, mix of live action and animation, called The Superhero. And then streaming vaguely existed, but it wasn't a big thing. As a filmmaker, if you made a film, what you wanted to do was get it into a festival, have a bit of a festival run with it, and then, fingers crossed, you get it into cinemas in a distribution deal. I knew one of those things was maybe an outside chance. I was realistic and probably knew it wasn't going to get a distribution deal. But anyway, we got an American sales agent for it. And they came to me and they said, we've sold it to Netflix. And it meant nothing to me at this point. They were basically a startup at that point, and the only reason I knew Netflix was because I think they just bought Love Film. I don't know if anyone remembers Love Film, where they'd send you a DVD and you'd watch and you get it back. And honestly, at this point, I think they were just looking for content, man. If you had a decent, there you go. Well done. If you had a decent cat video with a beginning, middle, and end, you'd have probably sold it to Netflix in 2008. But I mean, I didn't have much to do with it. It's since gone on it's on Prime as well. I mean, it causes me physical pain to watch the film, to be honest. I just remember the bad bits and how painful it was to get made and all the animation and stuff. But yeah, I mean, what was interesting is then when I did my next film in 2013, everything had changed. So you still wanted to get a film into a film festival because it was a short window. But then most people had kind of given up on a distribution in the cinemas and everyone wanted to get it on Netflix. When I went to, I had a premiere in LA and everyone wanted to get into Netflix. That's all they cared about. They weren't bothered about the cinemas. You know, they wanted to see it on the big screen at the festival, but that was the ultimate goal. And I think that's only got more so now. I mean, it's so hard to get anything in the cinemas, unless it's an established franchise or there's a ton of money behind it. So that's a good thing from streamers. They do give films a really good second life if you can get distribution in.
It's an interesting thing though, because the Silence was going to be in the cinemas and had a distribution deal, and the distributor went bust, which was great. And then Netflix bought it. But the thing, it's a whole different model, isn't it? Because Netflix buy a movie for a lump sum, give the filmmakers so many pennies, and then that's it. There's no potential for any back end. You know, they don't sell the DVDs. Yeah, if you get a movie in the theatre and you make it for 10 million and it happens to really take off and gross $500 million, everyone's in the money. But there's no back end for me on the Silence because it's there and that's it, and there's a lump sum payment.
I've always assumed that you'd get a percentage.
Well, officially I do, but there's no percentage. There's no.
No, what I mean is kind of like you'd have a long-term agreement where if they're continuing to stream it on their service for an extended period, that for every one stream you get a penny, like a...
No, as far as I understand it, Netflix buy the product for a lump sum, yeah. I mean, it's a lump sum that makes the filmmakers, yeah, okay, that's, you know, we made a bit of money on that and that's it, but it's the potential for something really taking off. I mean, the viewing figures on Netflix is mind-boggling. You know, they chuck a new movie up there. 50 million people or 50 million accounts will watch that film in the first 6 weeks. You know, if it's a really big one, it boggles the mind. That's 100 million people. That's a percentage of the world population watching stuff you're putting on Netflix. But there's no. I suppose the payback is recognition and, you know, name recognition and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think because I guess in your case, I mean, because the distributor went bust. You know, unless someone else takes it on, you're kind of screwed, aren't you? I mean, it's dead in the water.
And it's made, you know.
Yeah. So at least you have got the name recognition, you've got it out there, and hopefully it leads to the next thing.
I sold 3 more copies of the book because of it. Maybe even 4 more.
We bought 2 of them.
No, it's just I keep mentioning Shudder, but I've realised that they're actually putting some of their Shudder originals on Blu-ray and DVD now.
Yeah.
So like they're sort of moving back to physical media, which I love owning a copy of a film. If I watch it on streaming, I'll buy a physical copy if I can. But it's interesting that, I mean, how that would work in terms of percentages, in terms of the sale of that film and distribution rights and everything.
That's actually, I'm really glad you brought that up. Because basically what we've lost in the kind of like transition over to streaming is all this extra content that I know kind of as film buffs and people who are into content.
You said content.
I know I'm not a drink. you are behind me, sugar.
Too much special care.
Oh, fuck yes. Thanks, Tim. So basically we're like missing out on this situation where you used to get the behind the scenes thing, and these were like those added extras that were just the Hellraiser behind the scenes discussion with Clive Barker and all of the boys talking this thing through, and you pick up this awful trivia that you bore your friends to shit with in the pub, and you know they'd kind of go off to the bathroom and you'd never see them again until kind of work on Monday. But we've kind of lost that thing. But then there's the other side of this, which I don't think is as commonly known in the decline of physical media. So when movies were originally kind of put onto VHS and then to DVD, it means you need money to convert them to the new format, and people have to store them, and people have to kind of put money behind them. So every time we change format, we lose a whole bunch of films. And you've got kind of old cinemas and guys who are just emptying their pockets to try and keep these movies that none of us have ever seen, none of us will ever know to see, because the availability is zero, No one's going to pay to put them up on streaming. They're not going to turn any money, and so they get lost to the world. And there's going to be
Star Wars gone now?
again, we're going to be burning Wicker Man in the parking lot. I'm not a Star Wars junkie, but Joe, he'll fight you.
Well, there's something to look forward to.
You can get some makeup afterwards if you want.
I think Star Wars cathartic.
I think the original edit, the cinema edit's gone. I think George Lucas has hunted down and taken back every copy
Really?
of the unmodified version of Star Wars.
He's actually going into people's houses.
At least he's committed to his vision. You can't pat him on the back for what he's doing, but he's committed.
One thing with streaming, which 99% of people won't care about, it is essentially a worse product than compared to, say, a Blu-ray or a 4K UHD. I mean, in terms of picture quality, sound quality, it's not as pure, man, as what you'll get on a 4K disc. Now, most people don't give a toss about that, which is fair enough. But like a small amount of like really anal people like myself want to get the best quality version of it. And you know, obviously, and sometimes it just don't work, right? I mean, like Netflix crashes, it lags, it hangs up. So ultimately, like convenience will win out every time, and that's probably right. But in terms of the audio-visual quality, it is a worse product on the streaming platform.
Are you still angry about Betamax video?
There are some
It's a joke for the older people.
Yeah, I wish I wasn't old enough to know what you're talking about. There are some lines in the sand you can't go, that's mine. That's mine.
Most Betamax films I saw weren't horror.
Did you see Star Wars on Betamax?
Star Wars in the cinema.
I don't know.
Mentioning the cinema, we've lost the big screen experience.
Yeah, we have.
And what brings that back to me is last Saturday I went to see Aliens on the big screen. It's my favourite movie of all time, still. I saw it on the big screen in 1986 when it came out.
Tim, we're going to be friends.
Yeah, it's not aged. And watching it on the big screen, you see so much more detail that you'll never see on the little screen. And that's, I think, quality-wise. Part of it is just because it's a fucking little screen.
Yeah.
Big screen, oh god, it was like watching it for the first time again. It was amazing, absolutely amazing.
Was the cinema full?
It was a small cinema, but it was full. It was like, it's a view cinema, so it's got comfy seats and stuff. There was like 35 people in there and 3 or 4 empty seats. Mainly people of my age, really, to be honest. Just such, you know, and we are sort of losing that with these films made for streamers. Amazon funding movies and making The Tomorrowable. Oh, don't watch The Tomorrowable. Horrible. It's horrible.
There's an interesting thing with that, because at home, a couple of years ago, I've always wanted my own kind of projector and sound system and all that kind of stuff at home, and I put the money down, and it's the best money I've ever spent, and I can't recommend it enough to anybody. But the contrast in this, and this was just the other night, Pip and I were sitting in bed watching Horror Channel at 2 o'clock in the morning last night, you know, as you do, and suddenly realized that because we've got this massive screen in our house, which is the entire wall, you know, just projected onto it, you've got a surround sound and all that stuff, this terrible poxy horror movie, I think it was Urban Legend 2 from it was like early 2000s. Yeah, I know. And just because of the nature of, you've got this black room and this tiny little screen, you're forced to kind of squint and get close to the screen. And suddenly this became a little more scary, which was a really, really weird thing to kind of come to.
Just had a thought about
Don't be
like
sorry.
the different
Interrupt me, I'm an asshole.
different sort of cinema experiences and viewing experiences. Thinking about Host last year, sort of
That
coming
was
out,
phenomenal.
and how brilliant that is. But the fact that it's designed to be watched on your laptop screen, and that makes it so much more scary because you're part of that experience because it's sort of set over Zoom, and yeah, to have something like that is fantastic. But I do wonder how far filmmakers and writers can go with that sort of format, and if it's just the novelty of that, or whether interest, you can still write for that in kind of meaningful ways.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. That's a brilliant use of the format, and like it was using the fact that you can't go to the cinema in a really clever way. I really hope that the pandemic hasn't accelerated the move away from cinemas. Because I went to see Candyman on the first day it came out at 9 o'clock on a Friday in a central London cinema. You think, God, this should be full. There were 5 people in there,
really?
Including me. It's terrifying.
Is it good?
5.
Is it good?
The first half's okay. They did well to stay away, to be honest. But to me, like, I will always want to go and see like a big ass film on a big ass screen with a bunch of strangers. That is a special thing.
Yeah.
I think you can't recreate that with streaming. The streaming has a lot of uses. I would think it would be a genuine tragedy if we lose that. I will always want that.
Do you think it's going to become more? I mean, where I saw Aliens, the ticket's £4.95 in View Cinema. You get a comfy seat, reclining seat, leather. But I also, during lockdown, I was talking to a lot of friends and writing friends, and they were thinking that cinema is going to become more niche. It's going to become more like theatre. So they'll charge 15 quid a ticket instead of 5, and it's a night out, and you go and there's a bar and a reception, and I think that'd be tragic actually. Like you, I think that my kids still 18 and 22, but they still enjoy going to the cinema, but less so. They're more inclined to sit in their pit and watch streaming stuff.
I would love to go to the cinema more. That's really the guts of it. But it's interesting you said about the price things, because View, in the last 4 or 5 years, I think they were about 13 quid a ticket. This is up in Scotland anyway. And then they dropped it down to the 4.95 when they realised that they were shooting themselves in the foot by pricing themselves out. And I can't think of anything better than kind of turning up to the cinema for a full day. You roll in there, you grab a beer, you sit in the cinema, you whoop and you yeep and you have a chuckle, and you just watch every film that interests you over a day.
Yeah.
And it's completely fantastic.
And it costs you 20 quid.
Exactly. Like, that is a solid day out. And I mean, I'm sorry that we don't get to do more of it.
I would love to see more indie films in cinemas.
Art films, you say?
Yeah. Because I saw Censor a couple of weeks ago in the cinema, and that was a fantastic experience, being able to see it on the big screen. Because of course indie films don't get the sort of time in cinemas that big releases do get, and they're harder to find as well.
That's because Fast and Furious 9's in every screen.
I know. Interestingly, actually, in the town where I live, there's a small independent cinema, and they have the new James Bond film showing this weekend, and they've been told they can't screen anything else next to James Bond, and it means it's just pushed everything else out of that cinema for about 3 weeks.
Is that a common situation? I mean, in terms of kind of studios putting their foot down. I know that initially, when kind of Universal Horrors and Universal and all of those guys, before Universal kind of broke out, what the situation was that cinemas were owned by different companies. So they would only produce films to show in those cinemas, and the only films that they would show were produced by the owners of the cinemas. And then kind of when you got Frankenstein and Dracula and those kind of movies, they made such a hit that the cinema owners could not justify the situation and basically gave them all the finger, and suddenly it opened the plane up for everybody.
Studio One cinemas is happening again, because a lot of the cinemas obviously came into financial troubles during the pandemic. I
bought shares in View, by the way.
I think,
and Cineworld.
I think this has been happening more in the US and over here, but a couple of the big studios bought up some of the cinema chains because they could afford to. And in fact, they were accused of, when the pandemic rules loosened up a bit, they were accused of not putting their content into cinemas to stop people going from there, to put the cinemas into more financial trouble so they could buy them cheaper and cheaper. So that kind of thing is going to happen again.
That's crazy.
Are we letting people ask questions?
We can. Let's open the floor up. Why not? Gentleman in the front here.
With the American streamers releasing AAA programs every week, how long can British television survive as it is? against that pressure?
You mean like the BBC specifically, or just in general?
All British production.
Well, we've got a panel of pretty much just British across the board, except for me, I'm a migrant. I honestly, with the ingenuity of kind of watching people create stuff, it just comes down to kind of the realization of the image, I think. You get stuff like Lock and Key. I'm sorry, I'm taking over this question.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody has seen the Lock and Key series on Netflix. If you were fortunate enough to read the books first, and that's another one on the drinking thing, but they managed to take a story that was absolutely phenomenal and wring all of the joy out of it, everything that nobody gave a shit about, and some extra stuff that nobody really gave a shit about into this thing, and take all the magic out of it. So I think no matter what happens, people will always want good stuff and will gravitate towards us. And just because America's making stuff doesn't mean that we're going to stop having artists and people trying to express themselves here, I think.
I do think we hold our own. There's some incredible British writing that's appearing on TV. And the sort of TV streaming services are sort of keeping up with the patterns of sort of like the international streaming services. So, you know, the BBC will drop a whole series and then still release it week on week. So it's still got its traditional time slot, but you can watch the whole thing all in one go if you're on iPlayer. And you know, Channel 4 do and ITV do some other things. So I do think they try and hold their own.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I would also add to that, Britain has world-class production facilities, a lot of them around London, but also further afield. They're talking about opening more of them, for example, in Scotland. We're used as locations for all sorts of things. Britain is managing at the moment to profit from this, what you were talking about, this explosion of content. I just hate myself every time I say that. I think the problem is you face issues with things like Brexit, where international trade of all sorts just becomes difficult, and that's had an impact on film and television production in the UK.
I think, I mean, in terms of an industry, I think it's very healthy. And there's in terms of technicians and film professionals, I think where we're going to struggle as a British TV industry and film industry is if you try and compete directly, because we don't have the money and it looks shit. There's some exceptions like Peaky Blinders, which I think is genuinely great, very high production values. But the really good stuff that I think is quite uniquely British, like Shane Meadows stuff, It's a Sin by Russell T Davies earlier in the year, they're kind of shows you think that could only really have been made here, and they're quite uniquely British. There's definitely a good audience for it. They will sell abroad. So I think there's no point trying to compete with a really big budget stuff, because we can't. You've just got to fight smart on it.
Yeah.
And with that, we're going to just run this thing up. I've been told that we must get the fuck out of here. You guys just want to go around the table one last time and just give us your recommendations? Snappy.
Okay.
Something that changed you.
Something that changed me.
Whatever.
Okay. The best. I think I saw a show called White Lotus this summer, which I really enjoyed. It's 6-part. It works on many levels. It's really funny as well. It's the most I've seen. HBO show. White Lotus will be my favourite thing at the moment.
Fantastic.
My favourite film of all time is Heat. How that has aged, what it looks like now, I don't know. It is on Amazon Prime, I'd recommend.
Still great.
If it's your kind of thing, go for it. If not, fair enough.
That's such a big screen film, though. That gun battle, World War III, they called it, didn't they, in production?
Yeah.
See that on the big screen. For me, The Shield is my favourite series of all time.
Good show.
Wow.
Oh yeah, epic, and changed the whole landscape of TV for me. I think it was about the same time as Lost, which also changed the landscape but then ended badly. But The Shield has the best 2 last episodes of any TV series ever, I think.
I think that my sort of gateway into TV shows as kind of like a novelistic was probably something like The Wire, which still stands up now.
Amazing, yeah.
It's incredible. More recently though, Lovecraft Country. the adaptation, and
I'd love to go into this more, but we are
yeah,
terribly.
Oh, just see Lovecraft Country. If you haven't seen it, go see it.
Yeah, we could talk this thing until the cars come home, and they have just come home. Thank you very, very much, everybody, for attending this. We've got Adam Simcox, give him a round of applause.